of, and Dom, this is where I wanted you to bring you in. You've simplified team play with 3 Ps. You've experienced that freedom of play with girls going to higher level tournaments than they are capable of. Can you comment at all on anything we've been talking about relative to the simplicity understanding factor? And how do you get it across?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess just my experience is having, and Kim touched on a little bit just how literal the girls are. I know Darryl, you obviously have a daughter, so you can appreciate it. I just found that to be able to for them to be able to understand time and space and awareness is, I had to give them as the least amount of direction as possible. And I think, simplifying it down to, obviously we want to have the puck, and when we don't, we have to, to pressure it. And once we get it, we possess, and then obviously possess, we want to play. And again, it's super simple. But for me, I guess just seeing it from the other side of people trying to like, and use the term joystick, and I think that's one I like to use as well, is that they end up not understanding and not actually playing the game and figuring out why they're doing things. And so, as I say, I just in my experience trying to get them to understand when they have time, when they have space, is actually having them, just having them experience that without having to think, okay, where do I need to be? So, I mean, obviously, work in progress with what I'm trying to do, but just trying to guard against having them not just reacting to, where the puck is.
So Wally, let me just clarify what I'm saying when I say bullshit to shinny. One of the things that I think is like, if you have 2 control groups, okay, so if you have 2 control groups, and I take one control group and they're in Rubber Boots, Saskatchewan in the middle of January, and they just go out, throw the sticks down, and off they go and they play. And the kids play this and that, and it's great. And then you have another control group who is also playing. They're doing, scrimmages, and they're doing all of those things, the free play. And you have someone who just asks questions to the players. Hey, like, how can you create more space, or how can you create more 2-on-1s, or whatever? Not drills, not teaching them drills, or just asking questions or improving or asking questions. Which group is going to do better? Well, of course, the group that has a sense of reflection and has an opportunity. The Rubber Boots Saskatchewan group, okay, if they have multiple age groups that are on the ice, and you have a kid, one of the older kids, see some like young hotshot kid come through and say, hey, I noticed you do this, and maybe you should try that. That's reflection. That's reflection. It allows an input of ideas, new ideas. If they just play and you're asking them to figure it out on their own, the odds of all of them coming to an epiphany of where space is and what to do is really low. The kids who are going to figure it out are the kids who are on the right side already of the competency bias. They're already in the high end of the achievement gap, which allows them to explore and experiment more freely. The lower you are on the competency bias and the achievement gap, the more unlikely it is in that ice time that you're going to be able to be processing things as fluently. And so my thoughts are, I'm not saying don't scrimmage and you have to drill and this and that. I'm not saying that at all. I like free play. I do it all the time. I think it's important. Where I think you take it to another level, and where the kid is when there's opportunity for reflection, and you are asking questions and you're guiding a discussion that's where you have to be. And I don't think you have to be fluent in teaching to be able to ask some of those questions. You just ask the questions and get them thinking or pondering, because many of them might not do that on their own. And I think that's where I think we can really accelerate what we're doing with the Rubber Boots Saskatchewan group idea of throwing them on a rink somewhere and letting them just play. If that was the case, then all the kids would come from those environments because they're having such a rich environment, but that isn't the case. There's kids come from every which way. They come from all different ways. So what's the difference? In my mind, a lot of the difference is the encouragement, either naturally, the kids that are just reflective, or the kids who are just under that competency bias, having an opportunity to be asked questions to then be able to ponder what they're doing, so that the next time they go out, they're trying different things because they're aware of it.
Kim, I'm curious. I'm thinking of Kim in her environment, looking after Leaside, right from the U6 right up to the junior. Kim, what do you think? I'm curious about your thoughts on this issue and being able to get coaches to ask questions to make the kids think.
Well, I think that's the key, and I think, what Dom is doing and sort of having those key principles is what unifies and gets consistency, right? So the challenge for me, of course, is that we need some continuity between 32 competitive teams and 50 house league teams. And I don't believe that we should be starting from the beginning of the curriculum every year with every player who's already within our organization. And so I think having those key principles, and mine would be different than Dom's, and conveying those to coaches and then being able to ask simple questions. So for example, if one of yours is poise and you're scrimmaging, right? Can you stop the drill? Can you ask the player in line, okay, do you see any examples of poise when your players, your friends are playing here? Or did you have did you feel like you had some poise when you were under pressure there on the wall, right? So I do think that shared vocabulary can be extremely powerful. And I think it empowers coaches who perhaps aren't quite as comfortable on the nitty gritty of skill development to still have some shared concepts. And then hopefully the goal is to have players who are at, the U9 level who are starting to learn, for us, the 3 key principles, right? Then as they move up, irrespective of level or age group, they're not starting from 0, right? And it also allows us to have the flexibility that, different skills instructors or goalie coaches, because we can't just have one skills instructor for the entire organization, right? We can all still speak the same language without, as Darryl said, like joysticking them and dictating, you have to do it this exact way. So it's I guess a different thought process, but it's going to heavily rely on your point, Wally, to this, the questioning method, right? Because you have to engage your players by saying, how are principles being applied in this drill, or in this breakout, or even if you're watching game video, versus trying to drill them to death to do it the exact way. So I don't have an answer for you yet on whether it works or not, since we didn't get the chance to do much of it this year, but that's the intention. And I think there's absolutely a place for, scrimmaging or small area games and trying to draw out from our players how they're applying those key principles in those types of situations.
Where I think the rub is in how we're trying to equip coaches that don't have a lot of experience in teaching. And often our approach is to equip them with drills and alike. And I like the idea of giving them a whole whack of small area games that allows for some of this self-discovery, but that each game is given with them a series of questions, none of which they don't need to have the answer for. They don't need to have the answer for like what it is. They just need to pose the question, which is what takes that Rubber Boots Saskatchewan, drop the sticks in the middle of the pond and play idea, to a whole nother level to where, yes, we're going to do that. We're going to have this game. It has a few, like, this is what the rules of the game are. Off we go play. And then be asking questions when the kids come out of their shift in the game. They come over and say, hey, like, that was really good, but like, what else were you, what did you see that made you make that play? Boom, reflection creates a thought of options. And I don't know, I think as we talk about coach development, I'm wondering out loud to our group here as to how we equip Wally's biggest concern, which is the inexperienced coach who doesn't have a background and is not obsessive about this stuff. How can he be able to create value at those levels? Maybe this is a way, is to equip them with some of these reflection questions, and none of which they have to have the answers to. Just pose the question to cause that, and I think that we might get more out of that. And that's how we take the Rubber Boots Saskatchewan concept that we all love and know that there's tremendous value there, but how do we extract it? How do we extract that value? I think that it's having the true value of Rubber Boots Saskatchewan is the older kid who asks questions or gives ideas to the younger kid coming through. That's the true value of it. How can we have our coaches be the older kid that asks the pertinent questions that pulls it out? That's what I think. That's where I think we can be better.
Tom Malloy.
Your mic's
Tom?
up.
Yeah, Tom, are you? You have your hand up.
I think I had the ultimate example of the Rubber Boots Saskatchewan in the last few years when I took over the women's team. I had a player that grew up 100 miles from the Arctic Circle and 500 people in the town, and she taught herself how to play hockey, and maybe there was her brother or something. Then they moved down to a place that had a rink because she wanted to play hockey, and the only thing they did is divided older and younger group, and they played shinny with no input whatsoever. So anyways, she went to a sports school, and in grade 11, she learned what an offside was. So I looked at her when I first came out. I thought, this girl, she skates like Gilbert Perreault, like unbelievable moves with the stick, like everything, but absolutely saw nothing on the ice and got herself concussions running into players checking her because she didn't get the flow whatsoever. So she basically self-taught shinny and everything, but absolutely no questions asked to her. And I love what Darryl says about, because I remember in my era, we didn't get coached and we'd be playing shinny and an older kid would say something to you. And if you tried it, he might say something later to you. But if you didn't try it, he'd just let you on your own to flop. And that's kind of been my method of coaching ever since. But yeah, I think I saw the ultimate example of the rubber boots.
Tim?
Well, obviously lots to unpack, and Darryl, thanks again for coming on. It's always really sort of stimulating, interesting. I'm just thinking as we're all talking here, we've debated long and hard for many years, sort of about the figure it out philosophy versus the yelling and telling, and now we've sort of, and then the whole questioning method has come more to the fore, and really, in some ways, I got a bunch of thoughts running in my head. Sorry. In some ways, the questioning, as Darryl just pointed out, is sort of the biggest part of the figure it out philosophy. There's maybe a basic misunderstanding on the part of the vast majority of coaches that really at all levels, maybe not just youth levels, that they think their role is, as Darryl said, is to tell and to guide, versus they're there to question and create curiosity within their players. So that, there's maybe the pure figure it out approach, the pond hockey approach, which doesn't really work for all aspects of the game. Might be great for skill development and some read and react ability. So there's a place for that. There's a big place for questioning and helping players figure it out, not really on their own, but with your assistance. And I totally agree, Darryl. Like if some basic youth coaches who really are not really well equipped in an expertise area to help their players a lot, but if they are loaded with some pertinent questions to keep throwing back at their player, that's going to be a better, more productive approach in lots of ways than that same coach who lacks expertise trying to actually tell their players to do something. Like I think we're way further ahead if that coach decides, hey, I'm going to ask a lot more questions than I am going to try to tell them what to do. So it's sort of a marriage of sort of those real approaches, or it's a big part of those approaches. And last kind of thought for now anyway, it was very interesting. There was a little piece on the Olympics last night on Rosie McLennan, the double gold medalist trampoline artist, and her coach. And one of the things her coach said very clearly, very specifically, it's like, they've been working together or had worked together since she was 12 or 13. He said, literally, my biggest role was to ask questions and to let her explore her experience as an athlete and to help guide her in that way, something along those lines. So it's exactly what we're talking about. But very, very interesting application of that principle that obviously worked out pretty well.
Darryl, before you, I'd sure like to hear your comments and thoughts, but exactly what Tim has said, and you've taken questioning to another importance level for minor hockey coaches. They provide drills and skills and how to, and tell them how to. But the actual fact is, Hockey Canada is really not teaching skills as much anymore, and very little telling. But I believe creating tasks for coaches to prepare questions that they may not even have answers for to engage the kids, that has to become a part of coach education at those clinics sooner than later from the get-go. So, Kim, good luck with that idea at Lee's side, but you might experiment with promoting the idea, the concept of engaged learning. And one of the things, Darryl, Tim, a friend of mine, has written a book, and both Tim and I have talked to him, and he's given credit to some of our input. But he uses the phrase, whatever you do, it has to be the right stuff, the right amount, at the right time. And Tim adds the right way, which is sort of the positive coaching atmosphere. But Darryl, any thoughts on what everybody said to this point? And
yeah, like I think that just going down this path of how can I think a critical question that we need to ask and is being asked is how can we impact the inexperienced coach, give them tools that they can push player development along without having technical expertise. And I come from like my philosophy around the questioning and engaging the athlete is I was that guy. I was exactly who you're talking about. I was the person who knew nothing. I knew nothing. And I knew nothing for a decade. I knew nothing. And so oftentimes, and I can only speak about my own experience and how it worked for me. A lot of where I made my biggest gains when I was reflective on my own thing. Because one of the things, if I did nothing else, I was reflective. So whenever I had an ice time, I was always thinking about what did I do right? What did I do wrong? Like I was very personally reflective about my own performance as it related to the ice time. And so there was a lot of times I had said to my mentor at the time, I'm like I'm just firing this stuff off by the seat of my pants. I'm just throwing stuff against the wall. Like, I have no idea. I'm worried I'm going to hurt these kids. And my mentor would tell me all the time, like, Darryl, honestly, you're not going to hurt them. What you need to do is just ask them questions and then go off of their responses. And that, I wasn't doing small area games at the time. I was just talking about just skills we should be using and drills that I should be trying to implement. And it worked really well for me. And I'm not saying at all that this is the only way to do it. All I'm saying is this is my experience. And I was that guy that we're talking about. I was the guy who was coaching and had no idea what the hell I was doing. I had no business teaching anybody anything. I should not have been teaching any skating. I should not teach anybody how to catch a pass. I certainly shouldn't have told anybody where the hell they should be standing on the ice because I didn't know anything. But I did ask a lot of questions. I got feedback from the players, and the more questions I asked, the more I started to learn. And I think that as time went on, I kept that going. And if it can work for a rather uneducated, simple person like me, I'm pretty certain that a lot of these coaches that we're talking about, they're way ahead of where I started. And just giving them simple things like run these 4 games for this hour, just run these 4 games. And in these 4 games, in this game, ask these questions. In this game, ask these questions. In this game, ask these questions. Don't ask them to the group necessarily. Just ask them to some kids randomly, just to get them thinking, get them communicating with you, get them engaged. See if they'll try it on their next shift of that game. I mean, we're going to get miles ahead over that. And then when this coach eventually passes these kids to somebody who actually does know what they're doing, you now get an athlete who is engaged. They have an ability to reflect. They can try new things. I mean, if you just gave me an athlete that could do those 3 things before I got them, I would be way ahead as a coach that was receiving these players from a guy who was not as fluent in skill development as maybe I was, or the next person is when they get a hold of them. That's what I'm thinking.
So maybe when you get some time, Darryl, you need to sit down and try to do exactly that. Write up even a really short sort of manual for, well, it's really for any coach, but aimed at youth coaches. Here are 6 games to run at practice, 10 minutes each. Here are whatever, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 questions to continually ask. And also, I think it would be helpful, obviously, for the very inexperienced coaches. You're running this game. Here are 2 things or 3 things you can be looking for. And if it's not happening, start asking the questions to help encourage it happening. I mean, I think it would be totally awesome. In fact, I would love to have you come back on at some point in the future and do exactly that. Just sort of, talk about 5 or 6 games that, and I'm going to go back to what I wrote down at the beginning. I wanted to get you to talk about the L drill that you and Wally talked about in the car. But I think that'd be a terrific project for you and be very meaningful and obviously probably make you a little bit of money on the side. Not that you need much.
I'm going to take that on as a challenge. I'm definitely going to. I'm going to do that. I'll put a list of 8 to 10 games together with questions. And I think the interesting part out of this too, as it relates to the questioning part, is one of the big mistakes that I made for a decade was I coached the entire group all the time. And I didn't ask enough questions individually in the line. So the best part about a game is the game runs itself. Like, it pretty much is going. It runs itself. And so I don't have to be there say go, 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 and running the drill, right? So that frees the coach up to just slide into the line and say, hey, what do you guys see here? What's going on? What can you guys do your next shift? I think that was a big deal for me. And one of the rabbit holes I went down is I stopped using a board. I stopped using a whistle. I stopped doing all of these things. And the reason was because I was trying to come up with drills or games or exercises that were on the ice that ran itself. They were automated. It was the kids knew when to go next. So I didn't have to say, go, and run the drill. When you're running the drill, you can't teach or ask questions or do anything. So the more I think that I like about this train of thought is we're now freeing the coach up to actually watch what the hell's going on and be able to your point, Tim, hey, if you don't see this occurring, then maybe you can ask a question to pose it to the group, or just slide in a line and just ask simple questions. We're not talking about like, you're not asking questions that are going to solve world hunger. You're just asking like simple questions just to get thought and reflection, and not only just reflection, but a change of behavior in the next shift where they're trying to do something. So those are my thoughts that surround that. I get really fired up about it because it reminds me of when I was working with really good players and not really doing very much that was overly positive. And I wish I had somebody that would tell me this type of stuff, because I would have been really valuable had I done this, more valuable had I done this, and passed them on to somebody who actually knew what the hell they were doing. Those are the skills I want to give them, not the skating and the shooting and the passing. I want to give them the intent. Here's an attentive kid who's reflective, who has a willingness to try something new. Give me those 3 skills. I don't care what else you teach them.
Nice. And I really, sorry, Kim, you're next. I think it would be a great exercise whenever we could work it in, like sort of help you on with that project, Darryl, is maybe pick out a future day when you maybe can be on and send us 8 or 10 of your games, or 5 or 6, and we could just kick them around and hear your perspective and to sort of take a step in that direction. I think that'd be an awesome exercise. Kim, go ahead. And your mic's off too, Kim.
Thanks. I was going to say that, the nice thing, I agree with Darryl completely. Like when you're the head coach, unless you're running, I don't use a board anymore and just use my hands a lot and point. But I do find you can also empower your assistant coaches quite easily by, again, if you have those principles or those key concepts you want them to hammer home. And I think, being involved at the minor hockey level where most of the coaches are parents and volunteers, it's a great way to also increase engagement if you are sharing those key concepts and asking your assistant coaches to engage. It gets them more engaged instead of checking their phone or leaning on the boards, of course, right? But it just, if you have 2 assistant coaches, it now triples the amount of questioning that can happen. The other thing that popped in my head is just a tidbit to think of. I think using these small area games with, conditions or constraints or questioning to foster reflection is great. And then it's also the opportunity to film that game, right? Even if it's just an assistant coach on their phone, right? And maybe there's your video session you do with your team. Because often, I'll have coaches say, well, I coach, B, or I'm double B, or I'm A. Like no one wants to video the games. Like the parents don't want to do it. And there's sort of these, on game day, no parent wants to sit there with the video camera and not, cheer for their kid. So it just popped in my mind that this would be a great way to get very effective footage of the players playing in these small area games, and then be able to use that to facilitate, video sessions that don't necessarily have to be in like a real game. And I also think, again, with the girls, they're more likely to try things that are a little outside the box or outside their comfort zone in a practice small area game situation than they necessarily would be in a competitive game situation against a real opponent. So I think that might actually allow us to draw out a little bit more creativity in the girls and allow them to make a little bit more mistakes and challenge themselves outside their comfort zone. So just some thoughts I was sharing when you guys were chatting.
So Darryl, just if I could stick in here, just because before you got on, Wally was talking about his discussion with you about support.